Welcome to Martian Mixed Martial Arts.
Wow. Wouldn't it be crazy if the aliens manufactured you to be a mixed martial arts fighter? They're like, let's see if we could just turn this
I'm
dude
sure
into a bad
I'm sure
motherfucker."
if it would have happened, I would have been much better than this.
Much better than this. You're the fucking champion. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
but if I would be alien manufacturer, I would be Superman.
What is up, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious beings tuning into the podcast? I welcome you to episode 40 of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. This week we will be recapping the UFC 25th anniversary show that went down this past weekend in Denver, Colorado, and previewing UFC Fight Night 140, Magny versus Ponzinibbio, going down this Saturday night in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The UFC making its Argentinian debut for this event. To start things off, we are going to be recapping the Denver card that went down this past weekend. It celebrated the UFC's 25th anniversary. 25 years ago, UFC 1 happened in the same exact town of Denver, Colorado. So the UFC, to add a little sentiment and nostalgic to it, decided to bring the UFC back to Denver, Colorado for this monumental event. And even though it was a fight night card and it didn't have much star power behind it, I think that it still delivered a lot. It was a great card, and it was capped off with probably one of the most insane moments in UFC history. But you will have to wait to hear about the first 12 fights before you hear about the main event. So to start things off on the Fight Pass prelims, we had Mark De La Rosa defeat Joby Sanchez by split decision. Very close fight. I thought that Mark De La Rosa, was being the more active grappler in this one, and Sanchez was, I think might have been landing the harder punches in this one. It was a really close fight, man. I could see how you could give it to either guy. And I think I had De La Rosa in a parlay, so I was, cheering for him to get the nod. But I was a little worried, honestly. The scorecards were pretty wacky on this one. I think one judge gave all 3 rounds to De La Rosa, which should not have happened. It happened in the next fight, too, which was Eric Shelton defeating Joseph Morales by split decision. Another wacky scorecard on this one. We had a 30-27 scorecard and a 20-37 scorecard. So, 2 judges just totally seeing the fight differently, which just should never, ever happen. Despite your difference in perspective on calling fights, you should never have 3 rounds scored for one fighter and the other judge have 3 rounds scored for the other fighter. Both of those people weren't doing their jobs correctly. So Eric Shelton, though, looking pretty good in that fight. It was. I think that one shouldn't have been split. I think that was pretty decisive, unanimous decision for Shelton. Next fight, we had Devontae Smith spark Julian Erosa with a knockout 46 seconds into the fight. I saw this fight going this way. I knew Smith has really, really powerful straight punches. And, that's exactly what happened in this fight. I knew that Erosa had a weak chin. He has been knocked out a lot before. He's been rocked a lot before. And I knew that this fight was, going to be a quick one for Devontae Smith. And he, just a beautiful, beautiful 1-2 that just was a clean knockout. And great performance from Devontae Smith, and looking forward to him moving up the ranks at lightweight. Another lightweight bout, we had Davi Ramos defeat John Gunther by rear naked choke. Again, a very predictable outcome to this fight. World champion black belt Davi Ramos was taking on a very low skilled fighter in John Gunther. He took him down immediately and cinched up a choke in about 90 seconds after the takedown. So not really too much to prove from either guy in this match. We knew this one was going to happen. Ramos was a minus 1,000 favorite. Just really questionable matchmaking on why this fight even happened. It was a kind of a waste. Moving on to featherweight, we had Bobby Moffett defeat Chas Skelly in a bit of a controversial fight. The finish was controversial. I believe Chas Skelly might have won the first round, but Chas Skelly tends to fade later in fights. So I was looking to live bet Bobby Moffett if I had a good price on him, but he was only plus 140 after the first round, excuse me. So I passed on him, and unfortunately Bobby Moffett did end up getting the finish later. So I kind of, I had a suspicion that Skelly would fade and we could see Moffett take over, but unfortunately didn't hit that live line. So the controversy around this fight arose around the submission. So Bobby Moffett locked up Chas Skelly in a Darce choke, and it looked like it was fully sunk in. In order to complete the Darce choke, you really need to wrap up your opponent's legs so they can stop scooting away from you. You want to keep your hips and your legs as far away from your opponent when you're locked up in the Darce choke to prevent the choke from being fully cinched in. And that's what Chas Skelly was doing. He was keeping his hips away, but man, this choke was in. His neck looked like it was super torqued, and it looked like he was trying to go limp to make Moffett let go of the submission. That's apparently like what he was thinking. And the ref said, "Are you okay?" He shook his arm. It did not look like Skelly was like holding his thumbs up. It did not look like he was very had his wits about him. And then the ref stopped the fight, and then Skelly was complaining that it was an early stoppage and he never tapped. He did never tap, but he also was not intelligently defending himself. If you're trying to fake getting out of the choke as your defense, that's not defending yourself. So nice win from Bobby Moffett there. I knew he had great wrestling and great submissions in this one. I did not think that he would be able to get it on Chas Skelly, though. So a pretty surprising performance in this one. Very, very good performance from Moffett in his UFC debut. Next fight, we had another very close split decision fight. Ashley Yoder defeated Amanda Cooper. I think this one was the wrong decision. I think Cooper, won this fight. I had a bet on Yoder by decision, so obviously wasn't too upset with the outcome. But I got a feel for Amanda Cooper here. I think it's her 4th straight loss in the UFC. And no, not quite, but she's lost 4 of 6 fights in the UFC, so really can't catch a break there for her. Ashley Yoder gassed out really bad in this fight, was getting taken down, and was kind of losing the stand-up exchanges in this fight. So good performance from Cooper. It's a damn shame she didn't get the win. Next fight, yet another split decision. Mike Trizano defeating Luis Pena by split decision. Trizano looking really good out there, and Pena looking pretty bad. Something looked like it was off with Pena. There was some pretty steep line movement in this one the week of the fight. Luis Pena was around a minus 300 favorite for a while, but then was slowly dropping throughout the week and ended up around minus 160. So I don't know. Maybe some people saw the matchup in Trizano being a tough fight for him, or maybe there was some rumors going around about a possible injury. He certainly didn't look 100% in there. Trizano is a legit opponent, though. He was getting some nice leg kicks. He was able to level change successfully a few times in this fight, and I think that he rightfully won this decision. I was able to make a live bet on Trizano, and the fight goes to decision. So that was I didn't have any pre-fight bets on this one, but ended up winning on the live betting aspect. So that was a great line. Next fight, we had the 20-year-old prospect, Macy Barber, defeat Hannah Cyphers by TKO. Just some brutal elbows and punches, ground and pound. Had Cyphers busted up, was bleeding all over the place. I thought Macy Barber was going to dominate this fight, and I thought that she had a good chance of finishing. So I hit her inside the distance line, and that was a successful play in this one. And just Macy Barber just looks like a world beater, man. She's gonna be a potential champion. I think her grappling is probably her weakest aspect. So if she just focuses on shoring up her defense and getting her grappling up to her striking, then I think she has a real chance at going really far in this division. Next fight, we had Beneil Dariush defeat Thiago Moises by decision, a very dominant decision by Dariush. In the podcast, I said there's a difference between a jiu-jitsu black belt, a world champion jiu-jitsu black belt, and just any jiu-jitsu black belt. And I knew that Moises was a world champion who went around beating other world champions. And I thought that would make a difference in this fight, but it turns out there's a difference between a world champion jiu-jitsu black belt and a MMA black belt, which Beneil Dariush is. He's not a black belt in MMA as a whole. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu who focuses on MMA. So, it seemed like Moises didn't, you would not know that he was a world jiu-jitsu champion from seeing that fight. Beneil Dariush used excellent cage work. He was pushing him up against the cage. He was, taking him down. And just relentless pressure from Dariush. Moises looked really underdeveloped in there. He looked pretty good on the regional circuit. I thought he was going to do a lot better, but Dariush was obviously a very tough test for him. Lost a bet on Moises in this one, but no big deal. It was still a good night. And next fight we had Germaine de Randamie defeat Raquel Pennington by decision, a very decisive decision where de Randamie was just outstriking Pennington at will, stuffing all of her takedowns, avoiding the clinch. And when they did get in the clinch, de Randamie was actually having a lot of success. Her Muay Thai experience, landing some knees and elbows, and even trying some trips off of the clinch. So great performance from de Randamie. I really think that she could be a future title contender at 35. Next fight, we had Donald Cowboy Cerrone defeat Mike Perry by armbar in the first round. Just a great moment, great fight. Donald Cerrone is coming in there coming off of a bit of a struggle, right? I think he lost to Edwards. He lost to Lawler. Was he on a 3-fight losing streak? No, he wasn't. He lost 4 or 5 fights though coming into this one, and I knew that he had a big advantage on the ground in this one. I thought that he would be smart enough to wrestle and get this one on the ground. Mike Perry actually initiated the grappling exchange in this one mistakenly, and Cowboy easily reversed it and then cinched up an armbar. So great performance from Cowboy, man. Just vintage Cowboy, that elite ground game. He's, obviously we know he's one of the most talented strikers in the UFC, but he also has that incredible ground game off his back to go off of if he does get taken down, and that ended up getting the submission in here. So won on Donald Cerrone's money line and his submission prop, which got as high as plus 900. So huge win for us on Donald Cerrone, man. I fucking love Cerrone. He's one of my favorite fighters ever, and it was just awesome to see him get this big win here over Mike Perry as an underdog too. And in the main event, like I said, one of the craziest moments I've ever seen watching fights. Yair Rodriguez defeating Chan Sung Jung by elbow knockout. 24 minutes and 59 seconds into a 25-minute fight. That's right, 1 second left in this fight. Not only was there 1 second left in this fight, but Yair was losing. On 2 or 3 judges' scorecards, he had already lost the fight. It was already 3 rounds to 1. The round 5 was not a decisive 10-8 round for Rodriguez. He would have lost if this fight went 2 more seconds. No doubt about it. There is like I said, 2 judges already had 3 rounds to 1 for Zombie. I think Zombie was already on his way to winning round 5, and one judge had it scored 2-2. But he pulls this backwards, I don't even know how to describe it, backwards, upwards elbow that, just out of his ass, and lands it right on the button on Chan Sung Jung. Chan Sung Jung didn't see it coming one bit, hit him in like the neck under his jaw, and just put the lights out, man. So a comeback knockout in the last second of a fight that you're losing, and the only way you can win is knockout is, he pulled it off with 1 second left. Not to mention the incredible technique. Never seen someone land a strike like that ever. Like, imagine how many fights that I have watched, and I've seen almost every technique out there. Seen people throw 2 fists at once, 2 hammer fists at once from standing on the feet, but I've never seen someone throw this type of elbow. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to. Words don't do it justice. There's really no words to describe what the fuck he did. He was moving backwards, and he just, I don't know, man. A backwards, upwards elbow is the best way I can describe it. So just absolutely incredible knockout from Yair Rodriguez on the brink of defeat. It doesn't get any closer to defeat than he was right there. So, just incredible. And what a way to cap off the UFC's 25th anniversary. there were, otherwise, this event might have not been as memorable. Obviously, we had that memorable Donald Cerrone performance. He got the record for the most finishes in UFC history and the most wins in UFC history. So that was a great moment for Cowboy, seeing that he's from Colorado and has family in Colorado. Had that great moment with Macy Barber, making her debut, a decisive debut. Other than that, it wouldn't have been that great of a card, but man, this Yair knockout really made it a special card. Honestly, I think it's the best knockout in UFC history, all things considered. With the style, with the fact that he was losing, the fact that it was in the last second of the 25-minute fight, all those things added together, man, I think it has to be at least top 3, top 5 knockouts ever. So, props to Yair Rodriguez for pulling that victory out. And, got a feel for Chan Sung Jung being 1 second away from victory and, kind of letting it slip through his fingers there. So, great card. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the card going down in Buenos Aires, Argentina this Saturday night. UFC Fight Night 140, headlined by Neil Magny versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. Starting things off in the featherweight division on the UFC Fight Pass prelims, we have Nad Narimani, who is 11-2, taking on Anderson Dos Santos, who is 20-6. Looking over at best fight odds, we see that Nad Narimani opened up at -300, Anderson Dos Santos at +220. Not much betting going on in this one. Seems like Nad Narimani has sunk to -320, and Anderson Dos Santos up to +260. I think this opening line is about right. I mean, I think it might be a little high right now for Anderson Dos Santos. He is a pretty well-rounded fighter. I think both of these gentlemen are. Both of them have some decent striking, and I think they would both of their ground games are their best aspects. But Narimani's ground game is much better. He's much more heavy. He's a good top pressure, got good wrestler. Even though Dos Santos also specializes in ground game, I would say he's got a lot of submissions on his record. He's pulled out some great victories on the ground. Was losing a fight to Ricky Simone, who was undefeated at the time, and he ended up hitting a switch or a reversal on Simone. I think he actually rocked him with a punch, and then ended up taking his back and choking him out for that come from behind win. So that's probably his best victory. Anderson Dos Santos is, the rest of his wins I don't believe are too legitimate. I think that he has fought a lot of low level competition in Brazil. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think he is a decent fighter. I think that he is ready for the UFC, but man, I think that they're giving him a tough test with this Narimani in the first fight. So I think Narimani will control the grappling exchanges in this one, and it'll be a kind of a boring decision for Narimani. So moving on to the lightweight division, we have Devin Powell, who is 9-3, taking on Jesus Pinedo, who is 15-4-1. The opening betting line for this one, Jesus Pinedo opened up at -185, Devin Powell at +145. Looking over at 5 dimes right now, we have Jesus Pinedo at -200 and Devin Powell at +170. So again, not much line movement on this one. Pinedo sinking to a little bit more of a favorite, but still not much line movement. I agree with the opener in this one. I honestly think that Pinedo might even be a little bit more of a favorite. Devin Powell gets hurt very easily in his fights. He doesn't have too strong of a chin, and he doesn't have too strong of a body. He gets he's very susceptible to body shots. We saw him come from behind in his last fight with a crazy where he was rocked with I think a body kick himself, and then ended up finishing his opponent with a body kick. So he's definitely tough as nails, but I think that he's a little bit too hittable, and his chin is not very good. I think Jesus Pinedo is, he looks very good, man. He hasn't fought the highest level of competition. Most of his wins are over, pretty low level guys with not much experience. But he's running through them pretty quickly. I don't think that based on the gentleman's records, I'm saying that they're not too high level. But I can't imagine they're much worse than Devin Powell. I think that this is a pretty easy matchup in terms of the roster. I think Powell is probably on the lower end of the talent level in the UFC. So I think it's a very winnable fight for Jesus Pinedo in his debut. I don't know if I would lay the juice on his money line, but I certainly like his knockout prop. I got it around plus 265, I think. I'm going to check and see what it is right now. It is, let's see, Pinedo by knockout plus 275, so even better of a price now. So that would be my advised play on this one. I think that, Pinedo has a good chance of catching the chin or the body of Powell and putting him away. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Hector Aldana, who is 4-1, taking on Loreno Staropoli, who is 7-1. The betting line for this one opened up Hector Aldana as a plus 240 underdog. Loreno Strapoli is minus 320 favorite. Now, some insane line movement on this one. Hector Aldana is now the favorite at minus 115. Strapoli is also near pick'ems at minus 105. So crazy line movement in this one, shifting Aldana from plus 240 to minus 115. I've seen people have been talking about Aldana all week on Twitter and on forums. It seems like he's destined to lose at this point because so many people are advising to get on him, and that's very evident because of how his betting line has flipped completely. So I think that Aldana has struggled a bit in the UFC. He was knocked out by Keenan Song in his last fight. A pretty close competitive fight up until then, before he got his chin caught. But Keenan Song is a very legit competitor of himself. Not really known for his knockout power though, so Aldana's chin could be a bit suspect. He's also fighting a pretty inexperienced guy in Staropoli. Hasn't made his UFC debut yet. Has fought very low-level competition in Brazil. I think he's from Argentina. Yes, he is. So, if this one goes to decision, I think it'll favor Staropoli. How many Argentinian fighters are there? Not many. Home court advantage is definitely a thing in the UFC. People get decisions based on where they're from all the time. So that's certainly a possibility, but I really think Aldana will get his first UFC victory in this one, and just by being the more technical striker and keeping this fight at range. But I do worry about the scorecards a little bit. If it's a close fight, we could get fucked with them giving it to the Argentinian. But fingers crossed that Aldana gets this one done, maybe by knockout, so you don't have to trust the cards. Next fight we have in the featherweight division, Austin Arnett, who is 15-5, taking on Humberto Badende, who is 14-5. Humberto Badende opened up as a minus 260 favorite, and Austin Arnett opened up as a plus 180 underdog. Humberto Badende currently still stands at minus 260, while Arnett is up to plus 220 in this one. So some pretty interesting line movement on this one, with Badende's line staying the same, but Arnett somehow going up. Also, Arnett is struggling in the UFC. He fought on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, lost to Brandon Davis, not the highest level fighter, and then somehow got a shot in the UFC anyway. He must have been coming in on short notice for this fight where he fought Corey Sandhagen. Again, not the highest level opponent, and he lost that fight via knockout by a body kick. Actually, no, take that back. I take that back. Corey Sandhagen is a very legitimate opponent. I don't know who I was thinking of. I think I was thinking of Luke Sanders for a second, but Sandhagen's very, very good, tough as nails. And that win doesn't really hold. I don't hold too much against Arnett in that one. Arnett, though, against Dawodu, man, he looked lost out there. Hakeem Dawodu was just able to keep him at range and outstrike him easily. Dawodu being a pretty experienced Muay Thai striker of his own right. And I think that Badende will try to replicate that same game plan. He's a pretty flashy striker. It's kind of hard to see, kind of hard to know what Humberto Bandeira is all about. He's had 2 fights in the UFC, and they've lasted a total of 1 minute and 5 seconds. Winning one via head kick knockout over Martin Bravo, and then getting slammed and knocked out versus Gabriel Benitez in a pretty interesting finish in that one. So, like I said, it's hard to get a real vibe of what he's all about. In the UFC, at least, I just have not watched much of his regional footage in this one. But I'm not gonna be betting on this one. Honestly, I think just from a glance, I think I would not pay juice on Bandeira at minus 260. I think that Arnett has had some tough fights in the UFC, and I think that he's his skill is much better than his record indicates. So I think that Arnett's going to be trying to wrestle in this one, and hopefully Bandeira's takedown defense is on point, because he's going to need it. So moving on into the flyweight division, rest in peace. Alexandre Pantoja is taking on Oka Sasaki. Pantoja is 19-3. Oka Sasaki is 21-5-2. The betting line for this one opened up at Pantoja minus 305 and Sasaki plus 225. Right now, Pantoja has been bet down a little bit more to minus 360, while Sasaki's up to plus 300. I think this is a very accurate line. I would agree with it more where it is now than the opener. I really trust Pantoja in this one. Pantoja is great. He's he's surprising me in every fight. He looks really, really good. He arguably lost a very, very close split decision against Dustin Ortiz in his in 2 fights ago. That was razor thin decision. Other than that, though, he's looked really, really good in the UFC. He beat Brandon Moreno handedly, looking powerful on the feet with a nice crisp jab, good punches, and also he's got a great ground game, good control. He's able to take the back on people very well. He's struggled to finish with Dustin Ortiz, but he was able to get a finish with Neil Seery. He also has rear naked choked Brandon Moreno before on the Ultimate Fighter, so most of his wins are by submission, and I think that's the case for Oka Sasaki as well. He's a master at getting the back and getting the submission. His last fight against Janelle Lauso was just an incredible back take, and he ended up getting that tap in there. But he's got a good amount of wins by rear naked choke. He's also got a few losses by choke. So it seems like he's a bit he lost by Jussier Formiga by choke, who's a really high level grappler, but I think that Pantoja is right up there too. So I don't see Sasaki being much of a threat, especially a sub threat, considering that Pantoja is an incredible grappler in his own right, and I would have to imagine that Pantoja gets this one done fairly easily. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Michel Pereira, who is 25-2, taking on Bartosz Fabinski, who is 14-2. The betting line for this one opened up at Bartosz Fabinski as a plus 280 underdog. Wow. Michel Pereira as a minus 400 favorite. The betting line has been tightening up with Fabinski now at plus 165, Pereira minus 190, so pretty significant line movement in this one. I agree with it fully, man. That opening line was insane. Anybody who got on Fabinski at plus 280, congratulations to you, because, man, that might be one of the best lines of the year, honestly. I think, Fabinski is just a relentless wrestler. He's had 3 fights in the UFC so far, and I think he's racked up somewhere near 20 takedowns. He beat Emil Meek in his last fight. He also has wins over Hector Urbina. That was all the way back in 2015, though. He's a little bit struggled with activity a little bit. Maybe he had like some sort of USADA violation. Maybe I mean that's his last fight, or he fought in November of 2015 and didn't fight all the way again until July of 2018. So definitely something to be curious about there. But I mean, he came back against Emil Meek and just looked great. He was able to just take that fight to the ground repetitively with his relentless wrestling, and that's going to be his game plan here against Pereira. Pereira is on a 7-fight win streak somehow, beating some pretty good opponents in his in that run. Gilbert Burns, Desmond Green, Zach Cummins, Pereira did make his welterweight debut already against Cummins. I'm almost positive, but he's fighting a much more polished fighter in my mind in this one, which would be Fabinski. Fabinski is also, he's gonna have 6 inches of reach, gonna have a good or 6 inches height advantage, and he's also gonna have a 5-inch reach advantage too. So I imagine that this one. He's going to have an 8-inch reach advantage and a 5-inch height advantage. So I think that even if this one ends up on the feet, Fabinski could end up, jabbing and kicking his way to distance. But I don't think it'll spend much time on the feet. I think Fabinski will get the takedowns in this one, and I think that he will grind out a decision against Pereira. So, his price at plus 165, man, I still think that's a great price. His plus points, I think that would be, it might be minus 200, I think, for his plus 3.5 points. But Fabinski, I think, is actually going to be my pick to get the win in this one. Next fight towards the main card. In the women's strawweight division, we have Poliana Botelho, who is 7-1, taking on Cynthia Calvillo, who is 6-1. The betting line for this one opened up at Cynthia Calvillo as the favorite at minus 165, Poliana Botelho at plus 125. The line has since flipped, almost identically flipped. Poliana Botelho is now minus 155, and Cynthia Calvillo is plus 135. So pretty interesting line movement on this one. Seems like people are really trusting Botelho, and I would have to agree with them. I think that Poliana Botelho is very well rounded. We've seen her stuff takedowns from Pearl Gonzalez. We've seen her she's got I would say her ground game is a little bit unknown besides her takedown defense, but as long as you have good takedown defense, you don't really need a great ground game because you're not going to end up on the ground, and that seems to be the case with her so far. She's also got some really powerful striking, man. Her last fight, she had a fucking vicious body kick that knocked out Shuri Kondo, and she has a few of those wins on her record. A lot of first round knockouts. She just hits hard. She went to the cards with Pearl Gonzalez and won that fight pretty decisively too. So Cynthia Calvillo came into the UFC and was riding high for a little bit, winning a lot of fights by submission, beating Amanda Cooper and Pearl Gonzalez by decision. But she ran into a great wrestler of her own, Carla Esparza, in her last fight, and ended up losing that fight. I think she was actually serving a suspension for weed. So thank God that they got that monster off the roster. It's a damn shame they're giving her a second chance. She has a lot of wins. Jillian Robertson, Montana De La Rosa, Aspen Ladd. These are all girls right now who are having success in the UFC, and she's beaten all of them. So Calvillo is good, man. It's where the price is at right now. I would honestly probably side with the dog. I don't know if I would trust Botelho all the way down at minus 155, but if you were able to get on Botelho as a dog, I think that would be a good pick. So I think this one's going to be a good fight. I don't have any action on this one. I think it'll probably stay that way. And I'm just hoping for a good scrap. These two women can fight their asses off, so I think this one will be a great fight. Next fight in the bantamweight division, we have Marlon Vera, who is 13-5-1, taking on Guido Canetti, who is 8-3. The betting lines opened up in this one. Marlon Vera as the minus 260 favorite to Guido Canetti at plus 180. Marlon Vera has since been bet down to minus 310, while Guido Canetti is up to plus 255. I think this line's a bit wide, honestly. I think that Guido Canetti, they're disrespecting him a little bit with the line. I think Marlon Vera is 25, 26 or something like that, and Canetti is 38 or 39. So I think maybe that could be So Vera is 25, and I believe Canetti is 38. 38. So 13-year age difference. That's pretty big. I think Vera is the quicker guy. I think he's the better striker. But Guido can make fights ugly, man. He can take you down. He has pretty good top control. He didn't have much success leading up to his last fight, but he ended up coming back and beating Diego Rivas pretty decisively in that one. That was a good win for him. So I think that this Vera should be the favorite. I would maybe cap him around -150 or -200, but the value right now, I would definitely have to side with the dog and Guido Canetti. I think I don't know if I would go on his money line because I think that Vera will win this fight, but I think that it'll be a 29-28 decision. So if you can get in on the plus points, the line is not out yet. Though they usually release the points handicap around Thursday or Friday. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, actually. And so I think that in the next coming days, the plus handicap points will be on there. And I think that if you can get on Guido Canetti at plus money at plus 3.5, that would be great. So the pick's going to be Vera, but I think that this line's a bit wide. Moving on to the next fight, we have Cesar Mutante Ferreira, who is 13-6, who is taking on Ian Heinisch, who is 11-1. Cesar Ferreira opened up as the plus 140 favorite, plus 140 underdog, and Ian Heinisch opened up at -180. Now, I've heard some speculation along that this line was not actually open like this. It could have been a line error, but right now, Best Fight Odds says that is the correct opener. I have not seen anybody with like a bet slip or a ticket that says they got Ferreira at plus 140. He is now down to -185. Ian Heinisch up to plus 160. So the line did completely flip if it did in fact open up at what I said. But Ian Heinisch is making his UFC debut in this one. He's he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. He's got a good ground game, good takedowns, and he's also a pretty decent striker. And I think that the one problem I have with Ian Heinisch is he throws a lot of like flashy techniques. I don't know why. He'll throw a jumping Superman punch or a Superman jab or a spinning back kick or something silly, and it ends up getting him put in bad spots. So I think if he does that against Cesar Ferreira, I think that Ferreira will take him down and he'll tap him out. Heinisch's jiu-jitsu game is definitely his most unknown aspect, I would say. Most of his fights are contested on the feet. And he does, maybe rest a little bit to get the fight to the ground and look for a ground and pound finish. But he has lost to Marcus Perez via arm triangle. That was his one and only loss, was by submission. So, you got to think that Ferreira is going to be looking to grapple in this one. Ferreira is, excellent jiu-jitsu player himself, winning his last fight against Carl Robertson. Robertson, as we just saw him fight pretty recently, is a pretty dangerous striker, and Ferreira was able to level change and tap him out in that one. He's done that with a lot of fighters. And I think Ferreira is the much more proven guy. He's obviously has a lot of experience in the UFC. He's got 8 wins in the UFC. Actually, he's got 9 wins in the UFC, only 4 losses, beating pretty good competition: Sergio Moraes, Thiago Santos, Jack Hermansson, Anthony Smith, Nate Marquardt. So Ferreira is much more proven, and I think that he's going to be the pick to get this one done. And I kind of like, if I have to stab at this fight, Ferreira's submission line, even though it's not that great of a price. I think that that's how this fight ends up ending. So moving on to the light heavyweight division, we have Khalil Roundtree, who is 7-2, taking on Johnny Walker, who is 14-3. Johnny Walker is making his UFC debut in this one, coming off of the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Khalil Roundtree opened up as a -285 favorite, took Johnny Walker at +205. Now, Khalil Roundtree is -220, while Johnny Walker is +180, so a little bit of money coming in on Walker in this one. I think that's the right choice. I think that Khalil Roundtree is a very powerful, explosive puncher. We saw him knock out Gokhan Sasaki in his last fight. Very shocking performance. Very, very few people expected that. But he's got a pretty well-rounded game. Obviously he doesn't really take the fight to the ground very much, but he is very experienced in MMA. But he did one problem about Killer Roundtree is he gasses out. After the first round, he is a significantly different fighter. He has losses to Tyson Pedro via submission, Andrew Sanchez via decision. But he also has got a few nice wins, but they're mostly first round knockouts. He only has 2 decision wins, and he hasn't won a decision since 2015. Back in RFA. So I think that the later this fight goes, it'll favor Johnny Walker more. I would guess I would favor Roundtree in round 1. But Walker seems to be a decent striker of his own. I think that he might be able to avoid that knockout and take this into the later rounds, where he might be able to finish Roundtree in rounds 2 or 3. So if you have to play this fight, I would not go on either guy's money line. Honestly, if I had to go on, I would obviously be dog or pass. But I would stick with props, maybe Roundtree round 1 or Walker round 2 or 3. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening. In the featherweight division, we have Ricardo Lamas, who is 18-7, taking on Darren Elkins, who is 24-6. The betting line opened up for this one. Darren Elkins as the plus 155 favorite, and Ricardo Lamas at minus 195. Ricardo Lamas is currently minus 200, while Elkins is up to plus 170. I would agree with this opener. It seems pretty accurate. Honestly, I might even cap Lamas a little bit more, around minus 300. So, even though minus 200, bit of a steep underdog, or bit of a steep favorite, excuse me. I really trust Ricardo Lamas in this one. Obviously, you have to be aware that Darren Elkins is a fucking madman and, pulls some crazy wins out of his ass all the time, and you always got to be aware of that. But Ricardo Lamas is a pretty safe fighter. He the only time he's really been reckless is when he got knocked out by Josh Emmett. I think he lost to Benito Lopez. No, Mirsad Bektic. He lost to Mirsad Bektic in his last fight. Split decision, very close fight. Bektic is a very high level guy. He's very well rounded. But I think that Ricardo Lamas is just a little bit better in all aspects than Darren Elkins. Darren Elkins' wrestling is it's good, but I think that Lamas is might be even better. He's got a really, really good ground game. Also got some really powerful striking, and I think that Ricardo Lamas should win a decision in this one pretty easily. Darren Elkins, it's never going to be easy with Elkins, but I think that he will beat up Elkins a decent amount. Elkins got absolutely mauled in his last fight against Volkanovski, but he still lasted to a decision. So it's very, very hard to finish Darren Elkins. I don't know. The last time he was knocked out was 2013 by Chad Mendes. So I think that Ricardo Lamas will get this one done via decision. And in the main event, in the welterweight division, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio, who is 26-3, taking on Neil Magny, who is 21-6. Now the betting line opened up. Santiago Ponzinibbio at plus 160, Neil Magny at minus 210. Again, I do not think that this was the actual opener. I think that they opened this originally on 5 dimes, and then they voided everyone's bets and saying that we messed up, and they adjusted it. So take this with a grain a grain of salt, as they say. I think. So Santiago Ponzinibbio is just a great striker. He's got really, really great IQ. He can adapt well in fights. He's he's on a 6-fight win streak right now, beating really good competition. Court McGee by knockout, Nordine Taleb, Zach Cummins, Gunnar Nelson by knockout, Mike Perry by decision. He's beaten Sean Strickland, Wendell Oliveira. The list goes on. He's a very, very proven guy. He's from Argentina, if I'm correct. I think so, right? Yeah, Argentinian. He's just a very well-rounded fighter. I think his ground game would probably be his least polished aspect. And Neil Magny might look to take this fight there. He has done that before. He has taken people down and won fights there. I believe he did that against Hector Lombard, Kelvin Gastelum. That fight was a 5-round fight. And he might even have taken down Carlos Condit too. And he's a good striker as well. So I think that this one is going to be a competitive for a little bit, but I think that Santiago will take off and start landing the harder shots, and it will accumulate. I don't see it going to decision. I think Ponzinibbio might finish in rounds maybe 3-4, but I wouldn't be too shocked if it went to a decision. I think that Magny might be tough enough and have enough cardio to last the full 5 rounds, but I see it being maybe a 49-46 for Ponzinibbio. If Magny is able to get this fight to the ground, though, it'll be interesting. He isn't really particularly known as like a submission threat. Actually, I don't really see any submissions on his record, but one back in 2011. So it's going to be difficult to win the fight there. He's going to have to win rounds on the floor. He's going to have to land some pretty hard ground and pound that takes the gas tank out of Santiago Ponzinibbio, and honestly, I just don't see that happening. I don't think that he really has the wrestling to do it. I think Ponzinibbio has the striking to keep him at bay, and I think that he will win this fight at distance. So the pick is going to be Ponzinibbio to get this one done. Not too much in the way of news in this week in the MMA world. Only a few stories worth noting. Confirming my suspicions of last week, the rumblings, the reports, rumors, whatnot, that the UFC flyweight division would be closing are unfortunately true. That is definitely happening. The UFC has been releasing flyweights left and right. Guys who have a ton of skill, who are 1-1 in the UFC, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. Like, even though they have heavyweights who have 4 or 5 straight losses, who are guys who are 2-6 in their past 8 or something like that. Those guys are on the roster, here to stay. But the flyweights who have incredible skill, who are 2-1, no, those guys are getting cut. They're not being offered the chance to move up to 135. They're just being fucking cut. So that makes no sense whatsoever. It's a damn shame that's happening to people. Jared Brooks, Jose Torres are a few of the guys who I know for sure. I'm sure there's other names on that list though. Just a 100% wrong move to make by the UFC, and I hope that those other gentlemen make their way over to ONE FC to be a part of their flyweight Grand Prix going on. Also, in the way of rumors, we have, after Cowboy's most recent win, he's been talking a little bit of McGregor, saying that he wants to fight Conor, so he wants to drop back down to 155. Obviously everybody wants to fight Conor. Everybody, would sign that fight. It's basically Conor's decision who he wants to fight. But man, Cerrone would be a great fucking fight. It would be a great fight for Conor to get his feet, wet again. Not the hardest of opponent, and it would be, just I think a perfect B-side to Conor, someone who can talk a little bit of shit, has a great personality, is very, very deserving of the spot. Obviously, the winningest fighter in UFC history, the most finishes, one of the craziest, baddest motherfuckers on the planet, that Donald Cerrone is. So I really hope that fight materializes. Honestly, sign me up. I'm on board already. So we had Paulo Costa get injured with this fight with Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero now saying he wants to fight Anderson Silva. That's a terrible idea. Miesha Tate was signed as one of the executives over at ONE FC. I don't know if I'm pretty sure she's an executive. I don't think she's fighting over there. I'm pretty sure she's done with fighting. But yeah, vice president of ONE FC. Wow, so she's really going to be involved in there. And good for her, man. I imagine she has to move her entire life down to Singapore, though, but still. Good for her. And the last bit of news is a quote-unquote super fight between TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo, the bantamweight champion versus the flyweight champion, is happening at UFC 233. It's been officially announced. The fight will be contested for the flyweight title for some unforeseen reason, even though that the UFC is closing the flyweight division. The reason they're doing it is because TJ Dillashaw has, had his belt for longer. He's defended it longer. And Cejudo just got his, so they're giving Dillashaw the chance to earn the double champ tag, while, it would be kind of unfair for Cejudo just to come up to 135 to get the next title shot, while there's no real clear contender at flyweight, obviously, because since Demetrius Johnson is gone, there's no real contender at flyweight, so they might as well just do this fight. It's there's no reason for it. I think TJ Dillashaw should fight Marlon Moraes or Dominic Cruz or Jimmy Rivera or something like that. But unfortunately, all those guys are getting stiff-armed and they're getting, kind of fucked by this deal. And, in terms of the fight, man, I'm not really looking forward to it. It doesn't seem that appealing to me. I find Henry Cejudo immensely boring. I don't think he's very good of a fighter at all. So I hope TJ Dillashaw, punts his head across the arena. But Cejudo's wrestling is undeniable. You can't deny that. So it'll certainly make this fight interesting. But that's going to be all for the news stories in this week, which would also conclude this week's episode of Martian MMA. It has been the 40th episode. Thank you all for tuning in. And ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious being tuning into the podcast, thank you for listening to episode 40 of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. And I will see you guys next week before UFC China. Peace.